The sad story of a woman who was abandoned after sleeping with a man who turned out to be a wealthy CEO. Due to their difference in status, this woman was left after becoming pregnant with an unwanted child. Her pregnancy drastically changed her life, especially since the man refused to take responsibility. However, to cover up the scandal, she was forced into a contract marriage, even though she was always ignored and never acknowledged, because the man loved another woman. Will her relationship end in sadness, or will it turn out happy as time goes on? Right from the storyline of the film. This beautiful girl named Mayong is a secretary at a law firm who works hard to make ends meet. Mayong's character is very cheerful and has a positive aura. Her flaw is that Mayong can't say no to her friends, so she is often used as an errand girl just to buy coffee and breakfast, and this happens almost every day. Even though Mayong helps a lot with work outside of her responsibilities, she never receives appreciation and is not even acknowledged by her boss. That day, a lawyer at her office asked Mayong to buy candy for his child. As usual, Mayong couldn't refuse. When she was about to leave the mall, she saw a small child in danger because he was about to go down the escalator alone. Mayong ran to help him, but unfortunately, she ended up bumping into two small children who were carrying a lot of balls. As a result, the balls scattered everywhere, causing her to slip, because she was wearing high heels. Mayong accidentally bumped into a man who had just bought an engagement ring for his girlfriend at the same mall. Both of them couldn't control themselves due to the many balls obstructing their steps, and eventually, they both fell together. The incident caused Mayong's candies to scatter and the man's ring to roll away to who knows where. The man then tried to find the ring that meant so much to him, even going down the escalator. However, his steps were halted because there were many dogs at the location that were about to participate in the contest. Because they bumped into the food area, both of them were chased as they were considered a disturbance. When they reached a dead end, the owner of the animals came in, saved both of them. Fortunately, Mayong managed to grab the ring before the chase scene earlier. However, the man was angry because the ring he bought specially for his girlfriend was worn first by a stranger he didn't know. The man was known as Ligon, a handsome and charismatic wealthy businessman. Ligon became the leader of the household appliance company called Jiangyin Chemical. He has a firm, intelligent, and very authoritative character. There was a time when Ligon did not hesitate to fire a model who was unprofessional in advertising his company's shampoo product. Moreover, the model even considered Ligon's product to be of poor quality. They did not expect that even though Ligon was the company leader, he was very dedicated and willing to go into the field just to set an example for his models. Although he was of mature age, Ligon was still unmarried, which made the elders in his family very worried. At a banquet, the elders urged Chairwoman Wang, who is Ligon's grandmother, to have her grandson start a family soon to continue the family line. Unexpectedly, Ligon came and announced that he would be getting married in a few months, as his girlfriend would soon be coming to Korea. Ligon's girlfriend is a beautiful girl named Sarah, who is a ballet dancer. In the near future, she will quit her profession and settle in Korea to start a new chapter of life with Ligon. Back to Mayong. After returning from the Pearman store, his boss at the office informed him that today is the 10th company anniversary celebration. As a reward for the employees, he will hold a raffle with the prize of a stay at a luxury resort in the Macau area. Surprisingly, Mayong was the one chosen, but the ticket was valid for a couple, so Mayong had to invite one more person. Since his friends and mother refused to go on vacation, Mayong planned to sell the ticket he got to a friend who was interested. In the midst of his indecision, one of the lawyers at his office named Mr. Min invited Mayong to dinner. Mayong was a bit nervous because he had had a crush on the man for a long time. Mayong got carried away and thought that the lawyer really liked him. Especially the next day, the lawyer sent a message with very caring words. It seems the lawyer approached Mayong just to get a free vacation and become his partner for the trip. The naive Mayong eventually invited his lawyer to go on vacation together because he was sure that the man would confess his feelings. In a different place, Ligon was preparing a proposal for Sarah. A manager recommended a luxury resort in Macau, as it was the place where Ligon and Sarah first met. Unexpectedly, Sarah arrived earlier at Legon's apartment. Legon quickly hid his proposal plan so that she wouldn't find out. Being apart for quite a long time made both of them eager to quell their longing.
Well,
in short, Legon suddenly arrived in Macau and immediately started scouting the location to propose to his beloved. Photos were put up, flowers were arranged, and the orchestra music was ready to accompany. What Legon didn't know was that there were two of his enemies, disguised as resort employees at that time. The two of them wanted to trap Legon by putting drugs in his drink and sending a prostitute to his room. Unfortunately, before it could be given, the drink fell into the pool. At the same time, Mayan and his lawyer arrived in Macau. Upon arriving at the very luxurious 5-star resort, the lawyer immediately headed to the casino area and told Mayan to rest first. There, the lawyer was tempted by a beautiful woman he had seen before.
어쩔 거야 이거. 완전
After waiting for several hours, Mayan tried to find his lawyer because he wasn't feeling well. While sitting near the pool, Mayan heard a man talking to himself with words that sounded romantic and sincere, as he proposed to his lover. Unintentionally, Mayan suddenly sneezed, and it was heard by the man, who turned out to be Legon. Panicking, Mayan tried to hide, even drinking it all, because he thought the drink was still sterile. After drinking the drink mixed with an aphrodisiac, Mayan felt something strange with his body. His vision was blurry, and he was staggering as he walked. He then decided to return to his room because he couldn't find his lawyer. Meanwhile, two of Legon's enemies continued to follow him to the spa. There, they paid the therapist handling Legon in, then asked him to share. One of Legon's enemies then slipped an aphrodisiac into the drink there. Legon, who was very enthusiastic about his engagement event, drank the offered drink without any suspicion. After drinking the beverage, Legon realized that the two therapists near him were Mr. Park and a colleague. The two, who were caught, immediately pleaded with Legon to cancel the dismissal of all employees at the soap factory. However, Legon didn't care. He just left them while staggering away. Once in the room, Legon wanted to stay awake because he was waiting for someone to arrive. However, the effect of the drug was so strong that Legon fell asleep on the bed immediately. Not long after, Legon's two enemies entered and opened all his packages. And they wedged the door so that the woman they called could easily enter to trap Legon. As the two left, they accidentally turned the number 9 on Legon's door upside down, turning it into a 6. That fatal mistake caused Mayong to always enter there in a half-conscious state, leading to a night of passion between Legon and Mayong. The next day, both Legon and Mayong were equally shocked to find themselves without a stitch of clothing. Before they could recover from their shock, suddenly Mr. Pak and his colleague, who turned out to be Mayong's older brother, entered while turning on a video camera. Unexpectedly, they were also shocked when they saw Mayong under the blanket. The two of them then fled the room while Legon and Mayong were busy tidying themselves up, continuing to argue about what they had experienced. Legon kept accusing Mayong of conspiring with Mr. Park and his brother-in-law, while Mayong kept denying it, because he really didn't know anything. Legon only stopped intimidating Mayong when the hotel staff proved that Mayong was a guest in room 2006. Legon also saw for himself how the number 9 on his room door had turned upside down to become a 6. When he returned to his room, Mayong was very surprised to find another woman with his lawyer. However, instead of feeling guilty, the man insulted Mayong and called her a girl who is easy to use and discard.
웃겨? 아니 완전 뻑이 가서.
Legon was about to return Mayong's shoes that were left in his room, saw the incident, and immediately flew into a rage. He then took Mayong away, after responding to the lawyer's words with much more demeaning remarks.
넌 그냥 렉이야, 쓰레기. 너 같은 건.
Seeing Mayong's fate, abandoned by the person she loved, made Legon even more furious. It was understandable, as a short while earlier, Legon received a message from Sarah that his lover would not be joining him in Macau. After years of struggling on the ballet stage, Sarah finally received an offer to be the lead role. Legon also felt abandoned. It turned out that for Sarah, Ligon's love was not more important than her career in the ballet world. Feeling a sense of shared fate, Ligon eventually took Mayong to be made as beautiful as possible by a skilled makeup artist. The goal was none other than to get revenge and show the lawyer that Mayong was not just a sticky note, but rather super glue that could hurt people if they tried to destroy it.
당신이 얼마나 대단한 사람인지 보여주는 거예요.
Ligon then took Mayong to the place where the lawyer and his woman were. They got involved in a card game at the same table. At first, the lawyer kept winning. Seeing this, Mayong became anxious and feared bringing bad luck to Ligon. However, Ligon appeared relaxed and kept raising the stakes. Earlier, when the lawyer was confident he would win big, Ligon asked Mayong to double the chips he was holding. Ligon was not wrong in believing that Mayong was a true lady luck, because afterward, Ligon won a lot, and all the chips the lawyer bet ended up in his hands. That opportunity should have been used by Mayong to get back at the lawyer. However, Mayong's too kind heart couldn't bring himself to do it.
왜 이래? 같은 회사 다니면서 이러는 거 좀 아니잖아.
After gambling at the casino, Mayong and Ligon had a heart-to-heart conversation in the hotel courtyard. Ligon asked Mayong not to be too kind to anyone and to start thinking about himself. He also asked Mayong to forget about the events of the previous night. Mayong didn't mind, as he felt they would never meet again. They parted ways after Ligon's ride arrived. Since hearing the news, Sarah left Korea. The elders began to worry, because Ligon's marriage plans were certainly cancelled. They then urged Chairman Wang to allow Liam to replace Ligon. If within the next year, Ligon still hasn't produced an heir, Chairman Wang finally allowed Liang and his mother to live with them. Ligon was also forced to let him work as an assistant manager in his company. Despite Liang's seemingly foolish demeanor and lack of knowledge,
사장님이라고 불러, 이 싸가지 없는 새끼야.
the opportunity Liang had been waiting for finally arrived. That afternoon, Liang saw Ligon receiving a mysterious package that quite upset him. In fact, the package was sent by Mr. Park, who threatened to release a video of Ligon caught in the act of indecency at a hotel. Ligon, who was furious, then intended to meet his lawyer to sue Mr. Park, without realizing that the flash drive containing his video was left on the office desk. Liang took advantage of this opportunity to copy the video and store it securely. When Ligon talked about the extortion video, Lawyer Hong advised him not to sue Mr. Park because it could endanger his reputation. After all, if the public found out about the video of Ligon with a woman in the hotel, his image would surely be tarnished and it would affect the company's continuity. Hong also asked Ligon to negotiate directly with the people at the soap factory, rather than imprisoning them.
그 사람들은 절 싫어하거든요.
Meanwhile, Myung, who was working, only realized something strange about her body when her friend asked for a warm pad because of menstrual cramps. Myung then started to calculate when she last had her period and eventually decided to buy a pregnancy test. The two lines clearly displayed on the test made Myung feel uneasy. Actually, she had met with Lycon a few times, but she deliberately didn't want to tell him about her pregnancy. Especially since at that time, Lycon said he had gotten back together with Syra. Feeling guilty, Myung went to the church. In the confession booth, Myung talked about her pregnancy to a man she thought was a priest. The man did not deny it, but continued to listen to Myung's concerns. The man in the booth was named Daniel, a famous designer from America. He came to Korea to find his sister, who was separated from him when they were young because they were adopted by different parents.
현재로선 이분이 동생일 확률이 가장 높습니다.
After confessing her sins, Myung decided to return to Yeo Island and tell her mother. However, when she arrived there, Myung suddenly hesitated because she was afraid of disappointing her mother. However, the next day, Myung was caught red-handed using a pregnancy test in the bathroom to make sure if she was really pregnant.
뭐라고 임신?
What mother wouldn't be angry if she found out her daughter was suddenly pregnant without a husband? Moreover, Myung insisted on hiding the identity of the man in question, even claiming he was already dead. However, Myung's siblings didn't believe her and kept pressuring her. Seeing Myung being interrogated by her family, her brother-in-law named Mr. Koi, who also slipped a drug into Myung's drink, immediately intervened to stop them. Koi then revealed who the man was that had impregnated his sister. Coincidentally, at that time, Ligon was negotiating on the island. Moreover, Ligon also came to Myung's mother's restaurant with the factory employees to have a meal together. Seeing Ligon's arrival, Mayong's mother became furious and then forced Mayong to tell the man about her pregnancy herself. Upon hearing Mayong's confession, Ligon almost fainted and he was dragged to Mayong's family home for interrogation. Mayong's mother forced him to contact his grandmother.
집에 전화해라. 내 번호 앞에서.
At the same time, Ligon's grandmother nearly fainted when she saw a video of Ligon caught red-handed in a hotel with a woman other than Sarah. Of course, Ayong showed the video to his grandmother with the intention of having Ligon removed from the line of succession. However, what happened was unexpected. When Ligon called, Mayong's mother took over the phone and immediately informed Chairman Wang that Ligon had impregnated her daughter.
댁에 손주가 임신시킨 우리 집 귀한 딸 이름입니다.
Chairman Wang was initially very shocked, but shortly afterward, he smiled broadly. How could he not be pleased? Ligon finally gave him a grandchild to continue the lineage, which means he can remain the leader of the Janjin Jemikal. Chairman Wang asked Mayong's mother to keep an eye on Ligon until the next morning, as he would come directly to Yao Island and take responsibility. Trying to comply with Chairman Wang's request, Mayong's mother locked Ligon and Mayong in a warehouse. Mayong, who has a heart as soft as cotton, kept apologizing for getting Ligon involved in trouble and becoming the target of his mother's anger. Since childhood, he couldn't bear to see others in distress. Mayong had also decided not to let his child be born into an unwanted situation. He didn't want the child's presence to become a burden on Ligon and Sarah's relationship.
이미 결혼하고 싶은 여자친구 있으시잖아요.
Ligon also apologized because he felt guilty about the presence of the fetus. He asked Mayong to go to the hospital with him, as he didn't want Mayong to go through such a difficult thing alone. However, when Ligon opened his eyes, Mayong was no longer by his side. He then met with Mayong's family and informed them that Mayong was determined to terminate her pregnancy. Hearing this, Mayong's family was thrown into a panic. They then rented a boat to quickly search for Mayong at all the hospitals around the island. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Mayong met Daniel and still thought he was a priest. Daniel, who immediately remembered Mayong's confession at the church, quickly engaged her in conversation and advised her to reconsider her decision. However, Mayong's resolve was firm. She didn't want her child to suffer because they were born without love. Mayong also asked Daniel to pray with her before they finally parted ways, each with their own purpose.
좋은 곳으로 갈 수 있도록 해주세요.
It turns out, Daniel came to the hospital to confirm if someone believed to be his biological sister, who was separated from him when they were young, was there. Daniel's sister's name when she was young was also Kim Mayong, but after confirming the burned scar on the back of the girl he met, Daniel realized that the girl was not the Mayong he was looking for. Back to Lycon, who arrived just in time when Mayong was being examined by the doctor. Upon hearing the fetal heartbeat in Mayong's womb, Lycon was momentarily stunned. However, Mayong still decided to terminate the pregnancy rather than keep it. The procedure form has been signed. Mayong was already in the operating room. However, Lycon was seen staring at the ultrasound photo of the fetus in Mayong's womb. After some consideration, Lycon hurried to the operating room and asked Mayong to stop the procedure.
김영 씨, 빨리 일어나요.
As Lycon and Mayong left the hospital, her mother and older sister had already caught up with them, and even the head of the family arrived almost at the same time as they did. Lycon then became the target of criticism from Mayong's mother and grandmother. They thought Lycon allowed Mayong to terminate the pregnancy. Feeling cornered, Lycon then announced in front of Mayong's family and her grandmother that he wanted the child. For Lycon, wanting the baby didn't mean he had to marry the mother. However, this opinion was strongly opposed by Mayong's mother, as well as by Chairman Wang. Mayong also didn't want Lycon to marry her without a foundation of love. Her mother also said she would agree with whatever decision Mayong made.
뭐고 그게? 결혼은 못 하겠고 아는 가고 싶.
Mayong's words left Lycon deep in thought. He couldn't accept another woman in his life because he still loved Sahira. However, he also couldn't bear to let Mayong give birth and raise the child on her own. After much consideration, Lycon finally approached Mayong and asked her to marry him. In front of family and the people on Yule Island, Lycon and Mayong exchanged sacred marriage vows. Even though it was all very sudden, their wedding went smoothly and solemnly. The ring that Lycon once intended to use to propose to Sarah was now placed on Mayong's finger. Although Mayong married Lycon due to an accident, Chairman Wang was very fond of Mayong and immediately called her his granddaughter-in-law. Before returning to Seoul, Chairman Wang instructed Mayong to move into their house soon. He also planned to prepare a nice room for that line. After his marriage to Mayong, Lycon couldn't sleep well. Especially before making the vow, Lycon had contacted Sarah intending to inform her that he was going to get married. However, upon hearing Sarah's enthusiasm, Lycon decided not to ask. Moreover, at that time, Sarah was also about to make her debut as the lead dancer. Lycon was worried that if he told her everything, Sarah would fail in her performance.
내가 건전하를 얼마나 기다렸는 줄 알아?
Accompanied by his friend, in a heavily intoxicated state, Lycon kept rambling about his fate, having to suddenly marry a foreign woman he had just met. Everyone was happy except for him. Feeling concerned, his friend then distracted Lycon with a wedding gift given by Mr. Pak. His friend opened the gift and found a bottle of aphrodisiac pills. Lycon immediately remembered the alcohol he drank when he was at the party. In an instant, his thoughts about Myung changed. He suspected that Myung played a role in Mr. Pak's attempt to trap him. This thought made him so depressed that he consulted a psychiatrist. Lycon was truly angry and couldn't accept all the misfortunes that befell him.
다 내 책임인 줄 알았어요.
Meanwhile, Myung had returned to Seoul and was picked up by his friend to Mr. Wang's house, unaware of Lycon's anger towards her. No woman wants to be treated like Haema, but that's what happened to Myung. Chairman Wang really liked her, because he knew that Myung was a good girl, but not Lycon. The man didn't want to sleep in the same bed with Myung and instead let her sleep on the sofa. Moreover, Lycon forbade Myung from paying attention to him or acting like a partner. For Lycon, there was only one woman he loved, and that was Sarah.
다 알겠지만 한 번 더 얘기할게요.
Initially, Mi-young thought that Lycon would treat her well, and sincerely, just like before they got married. Mi-young even willingly left her job following the advice of Lycon's family. Lawyer Hong, who was already aware of the future of Mi-young's marriage, was concerned and advised her to contact the law firm if any issues arose in the future. When Mi-young discovered the hidden secret door in Lycon's room, she was struck by a harsh reality. That door was a passageway to a secret room that Lycon often used to be intimate with Sarah. Mi-young's heart was further torn when she accidentally watched a video of Lycon's affection with Sarah on the screen. They loved and admired each other so much that it made Mi-young feel guilty once again.
천사님은 처음 본다 정말. 아이 가지마. 아이고.
While still engulfed in her sadness, suddenly Lycon came and scolded Mi-young for entering his secret room without permission, arrogantly demanding that Mi-young sign the divorce agreement. The agreement also stated that Lycon would provide a $1 billion allowance after their child was born. But with one condition, Mi-young had to leave that place. Unable to hold back, Mi-young's tears flowed profusely, and she decided to sign the agreement by removing the allowance condition. Mi-young did not want to accept money from Lycon and intended to raise her child on her own. For Lycon, the baby might just be a tool to maintain his position as an heir. But for Mi-young, the child was more valuable than anything.
섬을 지키고 싶어서였어요.
Meanwhile, Chairman Wang, who knew that Lycon was being cold to Mi-young, immediately reprimanded him and inadvertently compared Lycon to his unfaithful father. Spontaneously, Lycon got angry and left right away. However, Chairman Wang was not out of ideas. He pretended to faint and had to be taken to the hospital. Lycon, worried that something might have happened to his grandmother, immediately followed with a look of panic. Upon arriving there, Chairman Wang instead handed him tickets for a parenting class and instructed Lycon to attend with Mi-young. Lycon couldn't refuse, even though he did it reluctantly. Actually, Lycon didn't want to completely blame Mi-young. However, his frustration with Mr. Pak made him constantly seek an outlet. The resentment burned in Lycon's heart, leading him to sell the soap factory on Yal Island to another business associate, who had also wanted the factory before.
궁금해서 그런데 거기 뭘 지으실 생각이십니까?
Meanwhile, Lycon's stepmother met with one of the elders and expressed her assumption that Lycon and Mi-young's marriage was just a sham, as was her pregnancy. She also bribed the elder to help her shift Lycon's position to Young. The elder agreed and asked them to find valid proof of the fake marriage. After the parenting class, Mi-young and Lycon parted ways. Feeling hungry, Mi-young then ate alone and met Daniel. Daniel then asked Mi-young to come to his new cafe. There, after Mi-young helped Daniel tidy up the furniture, they chatted with each other. Caught up in the moment, without realizing it, Mi-young shared all her worries with Daniel, who still claimed to be a pastor. Daniel himself felt close to Mi-young because she reminded him of his sister who was still missing.
귀여운 여동생이 생긴 것 같아서 정말 좋아요.
As it was already night, Daniel escorted Mi-young back to her home. When Mi-young stopped in front of a house and said that it was her home, Daniel was very surprised and didn't expect that Mi-young's husband was Laikon. At the same time, Laikon, who had just returned from the office, caught Mi-young and Daniel in front of his house. Daniel actually already knew Laikon, as he was well acquainted with the Wang family. However, Laikon did not know Daniel. Daniel's presence that night disturbed Laikon's heart. Moreover, before leaving, Daniel told Mi-young not to hesitate to contact him if she needed anything.
무슨 일 생기면 나한테 꼭 연락하고요. 알았죠?
How dare a man say such a thing to someone else's wife, and even in front of her husband? Meanwhile, after thinking it over carefully, Mi-young asked Laikon to give her some time regarding the signing of the divorce agreement. She was still considering taking care of Ollie herself rather than leaving him with Laikon. However, Mi-young also said that maybe one day, she would change her mind after being sure of who her child truly needs. Meanwhile, for Laikon, whether now or 10 months from now, they will still get divorced no matter what happens. The next day, Mi-young came to the parenting class alone again. When the instructor assigned the husbands to sew a diaper shirt, Mi-young intended to sew it herself because she thought Lagan wouldn't make time for the class. It turned out her assumption was wrong. To the instructor's surprise, Lagan suddenly appeared with his booming voice. Not only that, Lagan also immediately asked for a needle and thread and started sewing the diaper shirt with a happy expression. Seeing this, Mi-young's heart was filled with joy. Even though she knew that Lagan's presence was solely for the sake of the baby she was carrying. After class, while Mi-young and Lagan were waiting for a ride home, they were suddenly surprised by a greeting from a girl who claimed to be Sarah's friend. Lagan was flustered trying to respond, while the perceptive Mi-young quickly lied, saying she was Lagan's assistant. Indeed, Mi-young's kindness is beyond question. She even agreed to throw away the trash for Sarah's friend, which made Lagan annoyed and puzzled. Meanwhile, Sarah, who had finished her performance, was packing to return to Korea. She was very happy because she would soon meet Lagan. Actually, Sarah felt that something was strange about Lagan lately. However, she brushed off that feeling because Sarah thought Lagan would always wait for her as he always had. Sarah had no idea that Lagan was actually starting to feel unusual sensations when he was with Mi-young. In front of the elders who doubted their marriage, Mi-young explained the origins of her hometown, which was clean and comfortable. The elders were captivated by Mi-young's polite speech, ignoring one elder who had previously provoked them to shift the heir's position. According to the other elders, Lagan had found a diamond. After hearing Mi-young's words about how much she loved her hometown, Lagan asked Mr. Tak to find out what the business partner who had bought his factory on Yule Island was doing. It turned out that his business partner was planning to make Yule Island a dumping ground for industrial waste. Lagan regretted this and then contacted his business partner to negotiate. No one knows when human feelings can change. Like Lagan's feelings, which gradually softened towards Mi-young, even though previously his heart was only filled with mistakes and anger. Perhaps because they were often together, Lagan became more attentive to Mi-young. He even agreed to dance and sing with the residents of Yule Island when Mi-young's mother's group came to Seoul. Mi-young herself did not expect Lagan to take the time to have fun with them. Although shy and sometimes aloof, Lagan is actually a kind and understanding man. Seeing Lagan's sincerity, Mi-young's mother felt at ease. Because previously she thought that Lagan had mistreated Mi-young. With genuine warmth, Mi-young's mother extended her arms to hug Lagan and asked him to consider her as his own mother.
그래, 내도 네 엄마라고 생각해라.
Lagan's heart felt warm because of that hug. It had been a long time since he felt the warmth of a mother's love, and Mi-young's mother made him feel like he had found something that had been missing within him for a long time. For the sake of Mi-young and her mother, as well as for the beautiful and clean Yule Island, Lagan finally agreed to pay the penalty for breaching the agreement with his business partner. He could not bear to make Mi-young and the residents of Yule sad because of his foolish decision the other day. With a face full of relief and newfound awareness, Legon put back on his wedding ring that he had previously taken off. At Daniel's art exhibition, Mi-young, who came at the man's invitation, suddenly received a mysterious message containing evidence of the sale of the soap factory on Yo Island, which was going to be turned into a waste disposal site. Mi-young was very shocked and trembling, and Daniel, seeing this, immediately approached and asked what was happening. Mi-young then shared her problem and expressed her confusion about what kind of person Legon really is. At the same time, Daniel saw Legon coming, and a plan suddenly came to Daniel's mind as Mi-young was about to leave. A man who doesn't get angry when his wife is hugged by another man. This is not just about love, but also about pride. For Legon, even though their relationship is just a contract marriage, Mayan has to pretend to be happy in front of others. But how can Mayan do that if Legon has already disappointed her? Mayan then questions, what does she mean to Legon? She didn't directly express her disappointment when she heard that Legon sold the soap factory to a bad company.
아니 갑자기 그런 얘기를 왜 하는 거예요?
이건 씨,
Intending to cheer Mayan up, Legon came home carrying a large cake. But what he saw was Mayan holding a suitcase, ready to return to Yo Island, even though Legon asked. Mayan still didn't directly explain what made her sulk.
있는 듯 없는 듯 살아달라면서요.
Due to stubbornness, Legon eventually let Mayan go and pretended not to care. A restless heart led Mayan to pass by Daniel's cafe. Seeing her, Daniel immediately invited her to stop by.
마침 잘 됐다. 나 안 그래도 이거 준비 중이었는데.
As usual, the two of them didn't hesitate to share their concerns with each other. Now, Mayan felt more at ease to talk after knowing that Daniel wasn't a pastor. Following Daniel's advice, Mayan finally returned to Legon's house. Unexpectedly, Legon was already waiting for her at the gate. Even though he appeared indifferent, Legon was actually very worried about Mayan going alone.
이렇게 돌아올 거 사람 걱정시키니까 좋아요?
That night passed with the agreement that they would return to behaving according to the contract. The next day, Mayan's sister, Mija, visited with her husband. They intended to move to Seoul while ensuring that Mayan was being treated well by Legon's family.
서울서도 살아보고 고맙습니다.
Legon and Mayan pretended to be close like a loving couple so as not to make them worry. However, Mayan's unease couldn't be hidden. He deliberately didn't allow Legon to go on the ferry with Mija, citing being busy as the reason. Nevertheless, Legon eventually followed because he couldn't let Mayan appear sad in front of her sister. On the ship, Mayan finally talked about the sale of the soap factory and the waste disposal site.
왜 여울도 공장을 그렇게 이상한 데다가 팔았어요?
Legon finally understood why Mayan was so angry with him. However, before he could explain what happened, Mija, who overheard their conversation, immediately flew into a rage and made Legon the target of her anger. They immediately panicked and took Mija into a room inside the ship. But unfortunately, Legon couldn't find a doctor on board, and it would take 20 minutes before the ship reached land. With no other option, he helped Mija give birth safely. Relief washed over Mayan's entire family, and the mother grew even fonder of Legon, hugging him repeatedly. The residents also thanked Legon for building a community center on Yo Island. Hearing that Legon canceled the sale of his factory to a bad company, Mayan's heart was relieved of its resentment.
아이고야, 이 마누라랑 서울 구경 갔는데 어찌 알았겠노?
Mayan's perspective changed, and he promised to follow all of Legon's wishes. Witnessing a mother's struggle during childbirth made Legon even kinder towards Mayan. He even forbade Mayan from sleeping on the sofa again and asked him to sleep on the bed. Legon only realized how uncomfortable Mayan's sleeping position was when they switched places. Over time, Legon felt that his selfishness was unfair to Mayan and Sarah. Mayan, who kept giving in and complying with all his requests, made Legon feel guilty. If his wife had to suffer emotional distress because her husband loved another woman, Legon eventually asked Mr. Tak to book a ticket to New York. He felt he needed to end his relationship with Sarah immediately. One night, feeling uncomfortable sleeping on the sofa and unable to bear letting Mayan move from the bed, Legon decided that they should sleep together. However, after trying to sleep peacefully without thinking too much, they remained restless because they felt something strange about their feelings. When Mayan said goodbye to move, Suddenly, Ligon pulled her into an embrace and touched Mayan's face as if he was going to kiss her. No one can resist fate, just like Ligon who couldn't resist Mayan's charm. While his wife was lying down, Ligon watched her while gently patting her shoulder as if putting a baby to sleep. He had resolved to fully belong to Mayan. The next day, after attending a parenting class and having lunch together, Ligon invited Mayan to visit his office. All the employees stared at them until Mayan looked down in embarrassment and refused to walk side by side. Realizing this, Ligon then took Mayan's hand and asked her to be confident as the wife of a company president.
미영 씨는 이제 포스트잇이 아니에요. 뒤에 숨지.
For a moment, they really did look like a very happy newlywed couple. However, when they entered Lycon's room, a dark cloud immediately overshadowed Mayan's previously bright heart. How could it not? Ciara suddenly came and hugged Lycon tightly, right in front of her own eyes. Ciara was so happy that she only realized there were other people in the room with Lycon.
누구야?
Actually, Lycon wanted to immediately introduce Mayan as his wife, but the woman quickly interrupted him and claimed to be the personal assistant to the chairman. When they spoke alone, Lycon scolded Mayan for hiding her true identity. However, Mayan had her own reasons, because after all, Ciara seemed very happy when she met Lycon. Revealing Mayan's current status was not the right time, and Ciara was surely not ready to accept it. Lycon agreed with Mayan's reasoning, and then returned to meet Ciara with a forced laugh. This situation wasn't easy for Lycon. He didn't want to hurt Ciara's feelings, but he also couldn't bear to see his wife lonely. Even though Mayan seemed fine in front of everyone, she often cried in solitude. While Lycon and Mayan dealt with their complicated emotions, rumors were swirling fiercely outside. The rumor led journalists to chase Mayan as she was walking around the house. They kept portraying Mayan as a poor girl who deliberately stole a wealthy man from his lover for a stable life. Fortunately, Daniel came to help Mayan and drove the journalists away. Daniel didn't hesitate to claim himself as Mayan's brother.
동네 오빠입니다.
The rumor didn't stop there. Stepmother Tyrilican also took advantage of the rumor and Ciara's theft to warn Mayan that she was just a second choice like herself, who could be discarded at any time and have no place to rely on. In her heart, Mayan agreed with Stepmother Tyrilican's words. Especially afterward, when Mayan saw Lycon off to work, he seemed indifferent and didn't wave his hand as usual. Mayan thought that Lycon's behavior must have been due to their meeting with Ciara the day before. On a rainy day, Ciara arrived just as Lycon and Mayan had returned from the hospital after visiting their mother. Cheerfully, Ciara said she was going to meet Ekin while bringing a gift. Not wanting to keep lying to Ciara, Lycon finally told her that he was already married to Mayan, who was both his wife and the mother of his soon-to-be-born child. Of course, Ciara didn't believe it and thought Lycon was just joking. However, when she heard the apology from Mayan, Ciara realized that Lycon was serious about what he said. Feeling disappointed, angry, and heartbroken, Ciara was left speechless. She chose to leave, abandoning Lycon, whose tears mingled with the rain. In his solitude, Lycon could only cry, reminiscing about his time with Ciara. In scene 4, Mayan also cried upon realizing that Lycon and Ciara still loved each other. To dispel rumors, Chairman Wang invited Mayan to an upper-class gathering. There, Lycon's grandmother introduced her as the granddaughter-in-law, the wife of the company's president. Initially, people praised Mayan's beauty, but when Chairman Wang left her due to some business, the guests bullied her, calling her a shameless woman. As if that wasn't enough, Ciara's friend, who had met her while she was with Lycon, splashed a drink on Mayan's face. The presence of Mayan's rival only added to the heaviness in Mayan's chest. Her former date humiliated Mayan in front of the guests by revealing her issues as a struggling employee at a law firm. Mayan cried silently, and the guests, provoked by her rival's words, increasingly accused her of being a poor girl trying to become Cinderella. When Mayan felt like no one was defending her, suddenly Lycon appeared with a triumphant laugh on stage. With his arrogant style, Lycon drove away her rival and called him trash. He even introduced Mayan as his wife, and proudly referred to her as a diamond that didn't belong among ugly pebbles. Mayan was indeed an ordinary woman, Since she was a child, her math grades were always poor. She might not be good at calculations, but she would never be calculating when helping others. For Lycon, his otherwise ordinary wife was very special. After introducing Mayang, Lagan invited her to go to the riverbank, where he asked Mayang to dance and surprised her with a beautiful fireworks display. Lagan apologized because he had neglected Mayang for a while. It turned out it wasn't because he hated his wife, but because Lagan wasn't ready to return yet. However, that night, Lagan decided that he would stay with Mayang. Mayang should have felt happy, but instead, she felt scared. She was afraid she wouldn't be able to let go of Lagan when that day came.
나 기다려줬어.
The power of love can soften a heart that was once as hard as stone, and that's what happened to Lagan now. Since declaring that he would return to Mayang, Lagan has become more open in expressing his love through small gestures of attention. Mayang gladly accepted it, and they were even unashamed to show affection in front of the employees and Mayang's family. However, behind all the happiness he feels, Lagan is actually worried about the possibility of a hereditary disease that might appear and take him away soon. The reason is that the men in Lagan's family died in their 30s. Lagan shared his concerns with Dr. Octopus, saying that he wants to live at least until his child is 20 years old. And in doing so, he can protect his child until they are legally an adult. On the other hand, because Lagan cancelled the agreement to sell the factory on the island, he has to pay a penalty fee that is quite substantial. Lagan's position as president-director is also threatened with being ousted. However, he strategizes by appointing Daniel as the designer for his new product that will be released soon. This made the elders upset, as their efforts to fire Lagan always failed. Daniel and Lagan are actually always involved in a cold war. Lagan is jealous of the designer's closeness with his wife, so he personally dislikes Daniel. Nevertheless, Lagan acknowledges Daniel's professional abilities. Moreover, their collaboration also helps to enhance the image of Janjin Chemical in the public eye. To support the sales of their new product, Young organized a promotional event by arranging a photo session with Lagan, Mayan, and Daniel. Lagan was forced to agree because he could no longer afford to pay the penalty if he cancelled his collaboration with Daniel. Lagan also used the opportunity to appear affectionate with Mayan. Mayan was very happy to be treated with affection by Lagan. Especially now, they often have lunch together at the office. Mayan even thought she could live forever with Lagan. However, a call from Sarah shattered her dreams to the ground. Apparently, Sarah asked to meet in the Gangnam area. She also asked Mayan to keep it a secret from Lagan. In that meeting, Sarah discussed Lagan's relationship with Mayan, which was progressing without a foundation of love. According to her, Mayan will suffer if she continues to be with Lagan because their relationship is nearly a form of responsibility for the child Mayan is carrying.
자신의 아이의 엄마이기 때문에 옆에 있어야 한다고요.
Hearing that, Mayan immediately remembered the divorce agreement that Lagan had once brought up. Sarah was right, there was no point in Mayan and Lagan staying together because eventually they would part ways. After meeting with Sarah, Mayan told everything to Daniel. Daniel, who couldn't help Mayan, felt angry at himself. Seeing Mayan suffer emotionally made Daniel feel helpless as well.
결론 내릴 때까지 더 힘들어하는 건 늘 미영 씨 몫이잖아요.
He then asked Mayan to stay for a while so she would be more prepared when meeting Lagan at home. Meanwhile, Lagan, who had just returned from work, searched all over his room for Mayan, but he couldn't find anyone. Lagan waited for his wife in the yard, pacing back and forth. When Mayan finally came home, Lagan immediately scolded her because he was very worried. Mayan didn't say anything and just hugged Lagan tightly. Her heart truly longed for Lagan, but she felt powerless with their very complicated situation. At the charity auction event, Chairman Won asked Mayan to attend on his behalf. Mayan was quite surprised when at the event, the cup she made was actually included in the auction list.
우리 개똥이 아니야?
Apparently, it was the act of the stepmother who deliberately wanted to embarrass Mi-young in front of many guests, because the name on the cup was quite strange. The name on the cup was the name Mi-young planned to give to the baby she was carrying. Initially, the cup was auctioned for around 10,000. Of course, no one wanted to bid on it anymore, because to them, it was just an ordinary cup. However, when Daniel bid 1 million won and gave a brief explanation about art involving emotions, the auction participants began to dare to bid at high prices. Lagan didn't want to be outdone and also raised his bid to surpass Daniel. Mi-young, who saw it, felt uneasy because the rivalry between Lagan and Daniel was very apparent in front of the participants.
800.
Naturally, the guests who were hesitant dared to bid higher than that price. Mi-young should have been happy because she wasn't embarrassed, but instead, she became more afraid and immediately left the auction room, intending to go home. Lagan, confused by Mi-young's behavior, tried to chase after her and stop her, continuously asking what his mistake was that made Mi-young always want to distance herself.
안 보이면은 마음도 불편.
For the first time in her life, Mi-young wanted something for herself, which was to have Lagan completely. However, Mi-young realized that no matter how close they were now, the divorce agreement was waiting to be signed. She asked Lagan to end everything right now before Mi-young's feelings grew deeper. Lagan couldn't accept how Mi-young could be so unaware of his feelings, because in truth, they both wanted each other. Seeing Mi-young continuously express her fears, Lagan couldn't hold back from embracing her with all his emotions. After sharing their feelings that night, Lagan felt something strange in his body. His passion seemed ready to explode when he was near Mi-young, but Lagan didn't want to be reckless and force Mi-young. Instead, he tried hard to control himself and waited until Mi-young was ready to accept his overwhelming desire. As their closeness grew, Lagan and Mi-young became more enthusiastic about welcoming their child, who was due to be born on February 14th. After visiting the doctor, they also went shopping for baby clothes together. Happiness truly enveloped the couple, unaware that danger continued to threaten to separate them. Lagan's stepmother, who disliked the publicity of Lagan and Mi-young's love story in magazines, started looking for something about their relationship. One day, while Lagan and Mi-young were out, Lagan's stepmother entered their room and managed to find the signed divorce agreement by Lagan. She smiled broadly and immediately took it to one of the leaders who had been helping her all this time. And just like that, the greedy elder was very pleased because he finally found a reason to fire Lagan at the shareholders' meeting.
이래도 제가 다시 반지하러 가야겠습니까?
It didn't take long before the news about the divorce agreement appeared in magazines and newspapers the next day. It was truly ironic because just a few days before the scandal broke, the public was treated to the sweet love story between Lagan and Mi-young in front of Chairman Wang and several other elders. Lagan and Mi-young both couldn't deny the agreement. Chairman Wang, who was extremely shocked by their admission, almost fainted due to his rising blood pressure. At the same time, Mi-young's mother, who also read about the divorce agreement in the newspaper, went to the Gali family home to drag Mi-young back.
엄마.
Although Mi-young and Lagan both pleaded for a chance to explain, Mi-young's mother seemed indifferent. She couldn't bear the thought of her beloved daughter being treated so poorly, especially since some articles mentioned Mi-young as a woman willing to sell her child just for money. Mi-young, unable to see her mother in distress, eventually agreed to go home with her, while Lagan had to take care of the grandmother who suddenly fainted.
그 치사한 줄 알면서 내가 그런 짓 했어.
Both Lagan and Mi-young had actually planned to celebrate their birthdays together. Mi-young had even prepared a cup she painted herself as a gift. Meanwhile, Lagan had already reserved a spot at a fancy restaurant for a romantic dinner. In the midst of chaos, Lagan still wanted to keep his promise to celebrate their birthdays together. He also instructed Mr. Tak to devise a plan so that Mi-young could sneak out of the house without being chased by the reporters who kept bothering her. Meanwhile, Lagan himself also disguised himself for the same purpose. Mi-young did indeed succeed in carrying out the mission, but while Lagan was on his way to meet Mi-young, Mr. Tak received news that the board members were having an emergency meeting with the agenda of dismissing Lagan as president. Mr. Tak turned back to head to the company, but Lagan insisted on meeting Mi-young, just to say happy birthday. Meanwhile, Daniel, who saw the news about Lagan and Mi-young, appeared pensive, wondering why the divorce agreement scandal emerged right on their birthday. Daniel might not care about Lagan, but he was very worried about Mi-young. He immediately contacted and asked where Mi-young was at that moment.
예, 다니엘 씨.
On the other hand, Sarah, who had lost her spirit since her separation from Lagan, felt a breath of fresh air when her friends showed her the scandal article shaking Lagan's marriage on the internet. Sarah immediately booked a ticket to Korea. She wanted to use this opportunity to win Ligon back. Not much different from Sarah, Daniel, who was worried, finally went to the place mentioned by Mayong. From a distance, Daniel saw Mayong dozing off while waiting for Ligon to arrive. Initially, he didn't want to approach and just called to hear for himself how Mayong was doing, but unexpectedly, Mayong answered that he was fine and would have dinner with Ligon. Feeling uneasy again, Daniel approached Mayong and asked why Mayong still hoped for Priya, who always hurt him. Mayong still didn't understand what Daniel meant, until finally, Daniel expressed his true feelings, that he wanted to take care of Mayong not as a brother.
미영 씨가 더 이상 안 그랬으면 좋겠어요.
At the same time, Ligon, who was determined to meet Mayong, forced himself out of his car. He no longer cared about the company or anything else. All he could think about was Mayong. Mr. Tak, who initially tried to stop him, eventually gave up and let Ligon walk in the opposite direction. However, after just a few steps, Ligon suddenly fainted and was rushed to the hospital. No one knew what happened to Ligon. While Mayong was still faithfully waiting for him, Ligon was undergoing intensive care because he had not regained consciousness. Mayong should have been with him, but fate seemed to separate the two of them. When he opened his eyes and found Syra beside him, Ligon was very enthusiastic because he thought his proposal in Macau had been accepted. Ligon even called Syra darling. Although she felt strange about Ligon's condition, Syra was still happy because she thought their relationship would return to how it used to be.
나야.
From a doctor's examination, there was a possibility that Ligon was experiencing symptoms of a hereditary family disease, one of which is amnesia. However, the doctor couldn't confirm it yet because the other symptoms hadn't appeared. It could be that Ligon is only experiencing amnesia due to stress and overthinking. Mayong, who heard the news about Ligon, hurried to the hospital, accompanied by Daniel. Upon arriving there, Mayong's patience was tested again, especially when Ligon was hugging Syra right in front of her eyes. But suddenly, Ligon turned around and greeted Mayong as a dog ring girl. It turns out, Ligon still remembers their first meeting when they were chased by a dog.
나 알지.
In the waiting room, Syra invited Mayong to discuss Ligon's condition. According to her, they should follow the doctor's advice not to force Ligon to remember what happened, as it could worsen his memory.
그러고 나서부터는 계속
The doctor also advised Myung to be patient with her husband's condition. Earlier, Ligon suddenly entered the room and became suspicious when Dr. Octopus showed his medical records to Myung. With no other choice, Myung eventually pretended to be Ligon's personal assistant, recruited because of her running skills when they were chased by a dog. Although he found it strange, Ligon eventually accepted the statement, as Mr. Tak also confirmed it.
김비서 여기 있었네?
Actually, it wasn't a problem for Myung if she was treated as an assistant by Ligon. What mattered most to her was just being close to Ligon without feeling like a stranger. Sarai, who was worried, then warned Myung to stay away from Ligon. However, Myung refused, because no matter what, she wanted to be by Ligon's side until his memory returned. Ligon's amnesia condition was deliberately kept secret by Mr. Tak from everyone, including Chairman Wang. Myung herself also kept this a secret from her mother.
그 사람 아프다.
Both Chairman Wang and Myung's mother were equally upset with Ligon, who had yet to apologize and bring Myung back. They were worried that Ligon had forgotten his marriage, and also his feelings for Myung. After discovering that he had lost his memory for the past 3 months, Ligon decided to check his phone and found the name Love Snail in his contacts. Out of curiosity, Ligon called it and realized that it was Myung's number. Ligon then gave various instructions and told Myung to come to the hospital immediately, while bringing everything he had ordered.
사장이 없는 틈을 타가지고 땡땡이 치는 거 좀 딱 걸린 거라고.
While waiting for Myung, Ligon opened the internet and found a top article about the contract marriage scandal. Ligon realized that Myung was not just an assistant, but his wife. When Myung arrived, Ligon invited her to talk privately. And it was then that Myung once again received hurtful words. Ligon didn't remember that he had fallen in love with Myung, and he even accused Myung of wanting to trade their baby for money, and doubted whether he was the father of the baby. Despite being extremely sad, Myung tried to understand that Ligon just hadn't remembered yet, not that he didn't love her.
왜 거짓말을 한 겁니까, 비서가?
Meanwhile, Sarah kept trying to get closer to Ligon. She even quit the ballet world for the sake of her love. However, her decision was strongly opposed by her mother because she didn't want Sarah to be labeled as a cheap woman.
너 미쳤구나.
While Sarah was having lunch with Ligon, suddenly two twin women approached them. One of the women was an instructor in Camilan's class, while the other was an employee at the baby supply store. They both greeted Ligon and asked about Myung. But they were also puzzled as to why Ligon was having lunch with a woman other than his wife. Seeing all that, Sarah became upset and left Ligon just like that. When Ligon caught up with her, Sarah asked him to divorce Myung immediately. But Ligon refused because he was still uncertain. After all, Myung was pregnant with his child. Sarah then assured him that she would take care of the child as her own when it was born.
아기 때문이라면 그 여자가 애놓고 그 애만 데려오면 되잖아.
After a tiring day, Ligon returned home, and Chairman Wang immediately scolded him for not bringing Myung along. Ligon, who didn't understand why his grandmother was so fond of Myung, could only agree and went straight to his room on Mr. Tak's suggestion. Ligon felt that he had only been away for a few days, but the atmosphere in his room had changed drastically. There were storybooks and baby supplies there. Ligon also found a diary written by Myung. While reading it, without realizing it, Ligon shed tears. The next day, Sarah visited Ligon at the office. She asked about the photo of them that used to be displayed on the desk. Ligon searched for it in the drawer, and it turned out that besides the photos with Sarah, Ligon also found a keepsake there. Suddenly, his memories started to piece together one by one, from his meeting with Myung to how they expressed their feelings and eventually parted ways. Ligon's feet then stepped outside. He even let go of Sarah's hand, who was trying to hold him back. While driving, Ligon remembered his love story with Myung and deeply regretted how he had caused his wife to suffer for so long. His tears intensified as the car headed towards where Myung was. When his memory returned, everything was very painful for Lee Kun. Even though he had arrived at Myung's family restaurant, Lee Kun didn't dare to get out of the car and only watched his wife from a distance. Fear had enveloped his soul until he decided to end everything with both Sarah and Myung. According to Dr. Octopus, his late father had experienced the same symptoms as Lee Kun, and they were becoming more intense day by day. Lee Kun, suspecting that he didn't have much time left, then changed the divorce agreement into a will, in which Lee Kun would grant custody and all his assets to Myung if he passed away.
이혼 합의서에 있는 모든 내용은 없는 걸로 하겠습니다. 대신
Parting with his wife and the unborn child he dearly loved was not an easy thing. For the last time, Lee Kun wanted to spend time with Myung in the Camilan class. At that time, the instructor asked them to write a welcome letter for the baby when it is born. Lee Kun then asked Myung to write the letter based on his words, which unknowingly also expressed his heartfelt emotions. Fame, wealth, even love would mean nothing if his life was not going to last much longer. That's what Lee Kun felt and did not want to share with Myung. Before Lee Kun ended his marriage, he first met with Sarah to break off their relationship. Sarah, who was not ready to part with him again, could only cry, bang, and plead for them to return to how things were before Myung came into Lee Kun's life. However, Lee Kun was not at all swayed by Sarah's request because his decision was final. After solidifying his resolve, Lee Kun contacted Myung to meet. He also brought a cup he made and gave it to Myung when Myung accepted it. Words of farewell flowed from Lee Kun's mouth.
아무리 봐도 우리 집안 분위기랑 어울리지 않길래.
Before parting, Lee Kun gave Myung a message that he must remain like superglue. Initially, Myung did not realize that Lee Kun's words hinted that his memory had returned. Only when he reached the other side of the road did Myung realize that Lee Kun must have remembered their love story. Myung then turned around and called out to Lee Kun. Meanwhile, Lee Kun chose to strengthen himself not to look back. However, a few seconds later, Lee Kun regretted his actions. Myung, who was about to run towards Lee Kun, was suddenly thrown back after being hit by a car. The cup he was carrying also shattered, and thus everything became increasingly complicated. Myung's internal organs were torn and he had to undergo surgery. However, the procedure required anesthesia, which was clearly dangerous for the fetus. Lee Kun was forced to choose to save Myung because it was unlikely the baby could survive if the mother's condition continued to deteriorate. Lee Kun did not want to sacrifice the 2 lives that were very precious to him. Upon regaining consciousness after the surgery, Myung was devastated to learn that her baby was gone. Lee Kun could do nothing but try to comfort Myung and continuously apologize. The guilt overwhelmed him, to the point where he could no longer bear to stay by Myung's side. After recovering, Myung went to see Lee Kun again. Before truly parting ways, she asked if Lee Kun would be willing to forget the past and start over from the beginning. However, Lee Kun only responded with an apology, and that very day, the 2 of them went their separate ways. After parting ways with Lee Kun, Myung met with Daniel, who was about to say goodbye before returning to France. Daniel had sold his cafe because he was desperate after his search for his sister never yielded any results. During that meeting, Daniel handed over a brochure for an art school in France and asked Myung to consider it.
난 미영 씨가 거기 다니면 좋을 것 같은데.
On the day of Myung's departure to France, Lee Kun met with Myung's mother. It turned out that Myung's mother had also sold a restaurant that was previously bought with money from Lee Kun. She felt she no longer had the right to receive anything from her former son-in-law. Although she regretted everything that happened, Myung's mother understood very well that both Myung and Lee Kun had tried their best.
너도 미영이도 할 만큼 했다.
Lee Kun felt compelled to meet Myung one last time. Unfortunately, at that moment Myung was already at the airport with Daniel. Lee Kun tried to catch up before Myung truly went far away, but no matter how loudly she called out to Myung at the airport, they still did not meet. Myung himself was convinced that this time, they were truly not meant to be together. A few years later, Myung returned to Korea, and his appearance had changed to be more stylish with wine-red colored hair. Myung happened to pass by Lee Kun, but it seemed that Myung no longer recognized Lee Kun. His gaze at that moment was solely focused on Daniel, who was waiting for him at the airport. However, it was different for Lee Kun. Even though it was a brief encounter, Lee Kun turned around and seemed to recognize that the woman who had just passed by was Myung. On the lens side, Myung has transformed into a famous artist under the name L. Lee Kim. He returned to Korea to hold his first painting exhibition in his homeland. Of course, Myung's success cannot be separated from Daniel's support, who is always by his side. Even though they have been together for a long time, their relationship has never developed beyond friendship. A similar situation also occurs with Sarah and Lee Guan. After quitting ballet, Sarah became a homeroom teacher at a high school. Her captivating skills and beauty have earned her many admirers, and she often receives gifts. Like on that day, when Lee Guan picked her up and invited her to lunch, Sarah had just received flowers and a gift from a student who had graduated. While chatting with Lee Guan, Sarah opened her gift, which turned out to contain a charming necklace. As Lee Guan was putting the necklace around Sarah's neck, Myung entered the restaurant with Daniel. Inevitably, Myung saw the closeness between Lee Guan and Sarah from a distance, leading him to think that the two had gotten back together. Myung then decided to ignore his disappointment, although he occasionally glanced over at Lee Guan and Sarah's table, who were unaware of his presence. After taking Sarah home, Lee Guan immediately headed to the restaurant owned by Myung's family, which is run by a mother of 3. It turns out that even though he is no longer a son-in-law, his relationship with his former in-laws remains warm. Lee Guan considers Myung's mother like his own mother, and vice versa. The mother is indeed also very happy when Lee Guan truly comes and enjoys her delicious cooking. Every time they meet, neither Lee Guan nor his mother ever talk about Myung, even though in reality, Lee Guan always knows about Myung's whereabouts. In the room that has become a place to remember his unborn child who has passed away, Lee Guan also keeps the latest photos of Myung and follows her art exhibitions. However, Lee Guan does not have the courage to meet his ex-wife, fearing it might hurt her again. Lee Guan is not interested in marrying again, even though Chairman Wang keeps urging him. The grandmother even asked a matchmaking agency to find a partner for Lee Guan, although in reality, Chairman Wang still hopes for Myung to return as his granddaughter-in-law. Since Lee Guan shows no desire to marry again, Lee Guan's stepmother urges Myung to go on blind dates. It turns out, they are still targeting the position of heir to Jengen Chemical. Of course, those who always assist them also suggested that Young should quickly find a partner and have a child, so that the heir rights of Lee Guan would transfer to him. Meanwhile, Lee Guan went out of town to visit Myung's exhibition. There he booked room 2006, but the hotel gave him room 2009. Even though Lee Kwon insisted on exchanging rooms, he got nothing because that room was already occupied by someone else, who turned out to be Myung.
왜 하필 2006호냐?
Lee Kwon's mood was all over the place because the room he booked wasn't available, and he was confused about whether he should still visit the exhibition or not. Lee Kwon missed Myung very much, but he was also afraid to meet her. However, in the end, he went to the exhibition and even bought a very large bouquet of flowers. Sneaking around because he was afraid of running into Myung, Lee Kwon looked at the paintings displayed at the exhibition until he found a painting of a child with two hands beside their ears, striking a pose like a snail's eyes. Lee Kwon knew very well that this pose was a symbol of his love for Myung. Lee Kwon bought the painting and asked to have it wrapped on the spot. Myung was surprised that the painting of the child he made would sell so quickly. In fact, Myung himself did not intend to sell it. He asked for the contact of the person who bought the painting with the intention of getting it back. No matter how difficult Lee Kwon somehow tried to avoid Myung, he ended up feeling uneasy when he saw the closeness between his ex-wife and Daniel. Lee Kwon even followed them wherever they went.
저 다니엘 제비새끼랑 같이 있었던 거야.
When Myung and Daniel appeared to be getting more intimate, Lee Kwon sent a message as the person who bought the painting and asked to meet in a park. Lee Kwon did come, but he didn't dare approach Myung and pretended to suddenly have a fever through a message. Curious about the meaning of the painting he bought, he asked Myung without realizing it, and Myung replied through a message that the painting was a valuable possession that was also a part of her.
가족이고 분신 같은 존재거든요.
Of course, what is a precious memory for Myung is merely a deep wound inflicted by Lee Kwon. Feelings of guilt resurfaced in Lee Kwon's mind, leading him to punish himself by drinking until he was completely drunk. While half-conscious, Lee Kwon returned to the hotel and kept banging on room 206. Myung, feeling both scared and curious, finally opened the door. And so, the two met again as if by fate.
이건 씨,
The room that Lee Kwon was banging on in his drunken state turned out to be Myung's room. The man then suddenly collapsed, and Myung carefully brought him inside the room. When he woke up, Gun found a note from Myung asking him to leave before she returned. She also hoped never to meet Lee Kwon again. As Lee Kwon was checking out of the hotel, Daniel approached him. Gun thanked him because all this time Daniel had been taking care of and protecting Myung. However, Daniel did it not because of Lee Kwon, but because he deeply loved and cared for Myung.
그런 말에 자격이 있다고 생각합니까?
Throughout their acquaintance, Daniel and Myung complemented each other. When Myung was happy or sad, he was always by her side, and vice versa. Like today, when Daniel received news that his missing sister had been found. Daniel arranged to meet his sister at a cafe. The meeting happened so quickly and turned into a very emotional moment. Not wanting to spoil the moment, Myung left the two of them. On the other hand, Myung was browsing photos of herself on the internet. Her real mother thought that a quiet and innocent girl like Myung had now become very famous. Myung missed her very much, as did Lee Kwon, who was there.
얘 미영이야?
Myung's fame was indeed undeniable. The first day of the exhibition was very crowded, making her very happy. Myung then remembered that the painting she had sold needed to be shipped the next day. She was still trying to persuade the buyer to consider canceling the order. Unfortunately, the buyer always found excuses whenever they were supposed to meet. Knowing that the buyer had a child, Myung created a new painting featuring a mother and child as its theme. However, the painting that had been purchased was still sent to the address listed, which was the manager's house. Once the painting arrived, Myung sent a message to the buyer. She mentioned that she would be returning to France soon, so she was awaiting the buyer's decision urgently.
영자님, 제가 조만간 프랑스로.
Meanwhile, Young and the manager planned to boost product sales by involving female artists' works. As visuals are very important, there were several artists they suggested, one of whom was Lee Kim, also known as Myung. However, Gun firmly rejected it. The manager still provided the profile and portfolio of each artist. He also reminded Gun to separate work from personal life when making a choice. A few days later, Young invited Myung to meet up, feeling nostalgic, and it was clear that Young admired Myung, who had now become a successful and confident woman.
저도 도련님 생각 많이 했어요.
정말요?
The next day, Daniel invited Myung to have lunch with his younger sibling. Before entering the restaurant, she saw Daniel's sibling talking to a credit agency staff member who was helping Daniel find his sibling. It turned out that the two of them were conspiring to drain Daniel's wealth. Myeon, who found out about it, did not stay silent. While Daniel was on a phone call, Myeon confronted his sibling. She felt that the woman was not Daniel's real sister. Myeon couldn't bear to see Daniel being deceived and hurt, because he had worked so hard to find his sister. However, that person was taking advantage of Daniel's sincerity.
저는 이상하게 미영 씨가 진짜 미영 씨가 아닌 것 같아요.
The person claiming to be Daniel's sister looked angry and tried to hit Myeon, but the glass she was holding was thrown and shattered right at Daniel's feet. It turned out that the man was listening to their conversation. Daniel felt so foolish for trusting someone so easily. He then went to the place where he last saw his sister. At that time, they were both still young and playing around. Daniel's sister wanted to eat ice cream, and coincidentally, there was a vendor not too far away. Not returning from buying the ice cream, Daniel's sister was already gone. After going through many things, Daniel decided to stop searching for his sister. He believed that his sister was healthy and happy somewhere. Currently, Daniel just wants to have a family of his own. Myeon interpreted that statement as Daniel's desire to get married soon. Exactly. A day before Myeon leaves for France, Daniel will tell her something. Myeon was very sure that Daniel would propose to her. Feeling anxious, Myeon confided in alias Kun, the painting buyer. He advised Myeon to consider everything first. Later that day, Myeon met Daniel at a theater event. She entrusted the child's painting to the buyer because she would be leaving the country the next day. Knowing this, Kun couldn't just let it be. He then returned the child's painting immediately and inquired about Myeon's whereabouts.
지금 어디 있어요?
On the other side, Daniel turned on the projector and started drawing. He recounted the initial meeting until they reached this point. Daniel then went to where Myeon was sitting while carrying flowers. He proposed to the woman, and at the same time, Gun quietly watched from a distance. Myeon still didn't understand her feelings towards Daniel. Is it love or just gratitude because he was with her during the worst times? Thus, Myeon rejected the man's proposal. However, Daniel will not give up. From now on, he will approach Myeon and patiently wait until she is ready.
정식으로 남자로서 미영 씨한테 다가갈 테니까.
Ligon, who initially wanted to return the painting, decided against it. He couldn't bear to hear Myeong's response to Daniel's proposal. He doesn't dare to approach his ex-wife again, even though the manager doesn't support him getting back with Myeong. Especially now, his illness has gradually subsided.
3년 동안 못 잊으시면 얼굴 한번 그냥 확 까고.
In fact, Ligon is still worried that his genetic illness might relapse at any time. Therefore, it's better for him to suppress his feelings and continue to act coldly towards Myeong. Like right now, which is the anniversary of Gaidong's death, for both of them. When Gun headed to TKV for the accident, Myeong was already there first. Both of them recalled past events that caused emotional trauma up to this day. However, Ligon is good at hiding it.
당신은 잊으면 안 된다. 무슨 말 같지도 않은 말을 해.
Myeong asked Gun to live freely and forget about her and Gaidong. Unlike before, they have already given up on their insurance rights. Unlike Myeong and Dingsun, even though she is living a new life, she will never forget Gaidong. At night, Gun sent a message to Myeong as a gesture of reconciliation. They talked about many things like siblings. Myeong said that if her plans change, she will stay another 6 months in Seoul before returning to France. Unlike with Myeong, with Sera, Ligon does not want to have a relationship beyond just being friends. This made Sera's mother angry, and she forcefully entered Ligon's office. The woman said that Sera always cries every time she comes back from meeting that man. According to her, Gun is just playing with Sera's feelings, and if that's the case, then it's better for the friendship between the two to end. The cooperation contract between Myeong and Kangin Chemical has been made. Instructor Ahong handed it over to Myeong to be signed. He also mentioned that if there is a shortage of funds, Myeong can use the allowance from Gun. However, Myeong asked him not to discuss the allowance anymore. Afterwards, Myeong went to her mother's restaurant. However, Ligon was already there first. He even invited her out and told her to stop meeting her mother. Ligon argued that he just wanted to eat Myeong's mother's cooking and had no other intentions. He also claimed he no longer had feelings for Myeong. Myeong then questioned why she was chosen to collaborate with the company. Gun couldn't decide on his own because it was the company that recommended Myeong. However, if Myeong refuses to cooperate, she must provide a clear reason. In the end, Myeong agreed to sign the contract on the condition that the person contacted during the work process is Manager Tak. Myeong's attitude became slightly arrogant and stronger. In his heart, Kun praised her as very impressive. Because she didn't answer the phone, Daniel went to Mi-young's studio. He was worried about Mi-young because when she works, Mi-young tends to forget everything, including eating.
마지막으로 밥 먹은 건 몇 시예요?
The next day, Daniel invited Mi-young for a picnic. He apparently knew about the collaboration Mi-young was doing with Lee Kun's company. However, instead of being angry, Daniel actually supported Mi-young. Receiving support from someone close, Mi-young became even more enthusiastic. She then visited the company's plantation where the ingredients for product manufacturing are grown. At the same time, Lee Kun also went to that place to check things out and get some fresh air. He saw Mi-young taking pictures of various plants for design purposes. Gun followed every step of Mi-young until she reached near the goal. Mi-young placed her camera and drawing paper on a rock while she went in another direction to photograph plants. At that moment, Mi-young's drawing paper was blown away by the wind. Lee Kun picked them up one by one and put them back in their place. Watching Mi-young to avoid detection, Mi-young noticed Lee Kun and searched for the sound source. Lee Kun checked and sought fresh air. The two were finally brought together. Mi-young was angry and accused Lee Kun of following him, even though he had repeatedly said that outside the company, they should never meet. Suddenly, the rain started, and Gun took the initiative to cover Mi-young with his coat. The two of them ran down towards the shelter. Unconsciously, Mi-young and Lee Kun seemed to enjoy the moment. They were unfortunately trapped due to the fact that they were in the emergency shelter and couldn't safely go down the hill, as the bridge below the hill was flooded and access was restricted. There was no other way but to stay in the shelter, and the situation continued to worsen until the power went out. To pass the time, Gun told many stories, and he found the sound of the rain very calming. However, amidst the conversation, Mi-young insisted on going down the hill and wanted to go home immediately. Gun tried to hold him back so that Mi-young would stay by his side at least until the rain subsided. Suddenly, Mi-young developed a fever and his face became increasingly pale. He didn't want Lee Gun to touch him, and he didn't want the man to keep caring for him. From now on and in the future, Mi-young hoped they would both stay away because there was no longer any relationship.
우리 아무 사이도 아니잖아요.
Mi-young fainted due to a high fever when he insisted on leaving the lodge. Lee Gun diligently took care of him so that Mi-young's fever would go down quickly. The next day, Mi-young left Lee Gun, who was still sound asleep. He left a letter as a way of saying goodbye.
먼저 내려가 볼게요.
Meanwhile, at the studio, Mi-young was already waiting with great concern. Mi-young then recounted the experiences he had with Lee Gun. Not wanting Mi-young to fall ill, Mi-young invited him to exercise. The two of them bought very comfortable sports shoes. On their way back from the store, without either of them realizing, Gun was observing them from inside his car. That night, Daniel heard an argument between Sarah and her mother. Coincidentally, Daniel had bought an apartment near Sarah's apartment, and now the two of them are neighbors. It turns out the mother wants Sarah to return to the world of ballet. However, the goddess feels more comfortable with her current job. Sarah also scolded her mother, telling her not to approach Gun again. After her mother left, Daniel approached Sarah, who was crying. He invited her to eat ice cream to lift Sarah's spirits.
속 타죠?
Daniel then asked about the progress of her relationship with Lee Kun. However, the goddess did not want to continue a conversation that had nothing to do with Daniel. He felt that this conversation was still related to him because he had proposed to Mi-young. Back to Lee Kun, who forbade Mi-young and manager Tak from delivering the documents Mi-young needed to his studio. If they took the company's confidential documents out, Lee Kun threatened to imprison both of them. It would be better to just invite Mi-young to the office and let him conduct research without having to take documents out of the company.
왜 기밀 문서를 밖으로 유출시키는 겁니까?
Actually, that was just an excuse from Lee Kun because he wanted to be close to Mi-young. While Mi-young worked in the office, he brought health drinks and many vitamins. Lee Kun also waited for him in the room, but Mi-young felt uncomfortable, so he asked him to leave. Not only did he provide him with health drinks, Lee Kun also ensured that Mi-young went home feeling at ease, so Lee Kun monitored him through the TV side and asked the employees to turn on the lights in every room Mi-young was about to pass through. Lee Kun also didn't forget to order a taxi for the woman.
감사합니다. 감사합니다.
Lagan's attention didn't stop there. The next morning, he bought food at Mrs. Mayang's restaurant. This time, he wanted the food to be wrapped so it could be eaten with Mayang at her office. Upon arriving at the office, it turned out Mayang was already asleep, and Lagan approached her until she woke up. They then opened the food that Lagan had bought. Mayang then realized that the food came from her mother's restaurant. She looked angry because she had repeatedly reminded Legon not to meet her mother again. Legon defended himself by saying that he went there not with any hidden intentions. He genuinely liked Mrs. Mayong and already considered her as his own mother.
어째서 당신 어머니가 해주는 쌈밥을 처음 먹었다고요?
Feeling annoyed, Mayong decided to send a message to the painting buyer. Legon was almost caught because his phone rang at that moment. Legon quickly ran to the bathroom so Mayong wouldn't get suspicious. The next morning, Mayong received her first painting delivery from when she was in Paris. It turned out the painting was of a man surrounded by cherry blossoms. When she was stuck with her work, Mayong exchanged messages with the painting buyer. The painting buyer gave her inspiration, saying that there is a girl who lives in the heart of every woman. From that sentence, Mayong immediately found inspiration. Lee Gong also encouraged Mayong to complete her work well. In the end, all of Mayong's work was completed. The manager then invited her to the office to meet with Lee Gong, who wanted to say thank you. While at the lobby, she happened to meet Sarah, who initially wanted to invite Lee Gong for lunch. The two of them went to a cafe before Mayong attended Lee Gong's invitation. Sarah was actually worried about the collaboration between Mayong and Janjin Chemical. However, Mayong explained that she and Lee Gong only met for work purposes. After that meeting, it was her turn to go see Lee Gong. Lee Gong admired Mayong's work, especially when it was shown to all the employees involved. Everyone was amazed to see it and believed that the advertisement would attract women. As Mayong was about to leave, Lee Gong approached her to invite her to dinner. The woman declined because she was going to have dinner with her family at home. It turned out that today was her brother's birthday. For the last time, Lee Gong expressed his satisfaction with Mayong's performance. This farewell felt quite emotional for them.
아주 만족했습니다.
On the way to her family's house, Mayong forgot to bring the gift, so she informed Daniel by phone that she would be a little late. When heading upstairs, she saw Gun was there. The man was apparently carrying a painting that Mayong knew had been purchased by someone named Youngja. It was revealed that Gun was Youngja. Apparently, Lee Gong planned to return the painting so it could accompany Mayong. This was, of course, very disappointing for Mayong, wondering why Lee Gong would do such a thing to her.
이건 씨 대체 나한테 왜 이러는 거예요?
At that moment, Lee Gong admitted that he was Lee Youngja, the person who bought the painting. This fact made Mayong feel disappointed, because for the past 3 years, she couldn't forget Lee Gong. But it turned out, the man was just playing with her feelings. All the sweet words Gun sent as Youngja were falsehoods.
어떻게 이런 일을 할 수가 있어요?
He was just pretending so that Mayong would believe Youngja was a different person. Mayong apparently fell into his trap. Meanwhile, Gun thought Mayong hadn't changed and was easily fooled. His cruel words made Mayong instantly furious. However, there was something that hurt Mayong even more, which was when Legon said that the child's painting was like an ordinary painting and meant nothing to him. It was actually difficult for Lee Gong to say that, especially since the painting was truly valuable. Every night, Gun would always gaze at the painting and talk to it as if it were truly alive. He then sat in contemplation on the stairs of Mayong's studio. Legon didn't realize that Daniel's eyes were watching him. Bria apparently intended to call Mayong because he hadn't shown up. On the other hand, Legon's words had long hurt Mayong's feelings, so he decided to return to Paris to avoid meeting him again. He shared this plan with Daniel, revealing that the person who bought the mysterious painting was Legon. In the afternoon, Cyan visited Mayong's studio and mentioned that Grandma had signed Gun up with the matchmaking agency she runs. Grandma hopes to find a kind-hearted son-in-law like Mayong.
맨날 언니랑 똑같은 여자 찾아오라고 일주일에 한 번씩 나 부르신단 말이야.
All this time, Lee Guin has never been close to any woman. Mayan also confirmed this to Jayan, who agreed. If Lee Guin has indeed been single since his divorce from Mayan, even his grandmother is very worried about him because Lee Guin hasn't remarried. The assumption that Lee Guin and Sarah were dating was finally disproven. It turns out they were just friends, but today, Gun will decide to end that bond. Lee Guin assumes that Sarah is tired of maintaining their friendship, so he will soon end it.
이제 그만하자. 그 친구 사이.
Lee Guin's decision left Sarah feeling troubled, so she invited Daniel to have a drink together and shared her grievances, feeling that she has truly been rejected by Gun, because the man seems to still love his ex-wife. Unexpectedly for Daniel, It turns out Gun has been suffering from a chronic illness all this time. He separated from Mayan because he didn't want to burden his partner, and this information truly shocked Daniel. The next day, while packing, Mayan found a letter tucked in the corner of a painting frame that was returned by Lee Guin. The painting hinted that Lee Guin had been lying to him all this time, because it turns out Lee Guin kept remembering the painting.
다시 떠올리게 돼서 정말 행복했습니다.
There were several sentences in Gun's message that, when matched, didn't sync with his words. In the end, Mayan informed Gun about this directly. She also wanted to return the money for the painting purchase that Lee Guin didn't accept. Mayan apparently wanted to ensure whether all of Gun's words and letters or messages were true, or just empty promises. At least, before leaving for Paris, she needed to know the facts. However, Lee Guin ended up driving her away. Because her departure to Paris was very sudden, Mayan met with lawyer Hung. The man asked why Mayan and Lee Guin had separated in the past. In fact, they were actually a very compatible couple. Mayan also didn't know, because Lee Guin suddenly ended the relationship without giving a reason. There are many things Mayan has just learned, one of which is her meeting with Sarah this time.
궁금해지려고 해요.
Sarah also brought up their meeting 3 years ago when she showed Gun's divorce papers. Sarah apparently wanted to clarify that the document was actually fake. She deliberately did that to win Gun's heart over to Bali. Before leaving for Paris, Mayan still attended an event titled Women's Advertising Night. During the interview session, she was asked about the process of getting inspiration for her project with Genjin Chemical. Coincidentally, Lee Guin was standing on the stairs, right in front of her at that moment. Mayan firmly answered that there is someone she trusts who always gives her ideas.
다른 분이 영감을
All this time, that person has also always listened to Anne, warmly comforted Mayan. Mayan is very grateful to that person. Even though right now, she has lost contact. Mayan, who is sincere, doesn't care about what that person thinks. While saying goodbye to her mother at the restaurant, suddenly Lee Guin came to approach her. Mayan's mother gave a signal to leave immediately, but Mayan instead asked her to prepare a meal for Lee Guin.
오신선님 밥도 안 주고 내주는 법이 어딨나?
The two of them ended up eating at different tables without any communication. After saying goodbye to her mother, Mayan was also going to prepare her child. Lee Guin could only watch her from a distance. The next day, when everything was ready, Mayan found a recording device in her bag. It seems that the person who put the device there was attorney Hong. As soon as the recording was played, Lee Guin's voice could be heard reading a will. It turns out Lee Guin had hidden his illness from Mayan and he was going to give the studio in Paris to his ex-wife.
전저 김미영 씨가 몰랐으면 합니다.
Daniel initially pretended not to hear Mayan's invitation to leave. However, midway through the journey, he turned back. Daniel didn't want to live with regret, so he was willing to take Mayan to Lee Guin's house. He hoped Mayan could find out what Lee Guin had been hiding all this time.
미영 씨 이대로 떠나면 평생 못 잊을 거잖아요.
Upon arriving at Lee Guin's house, it turned out that the man they were looking for had gone to the barium column to place a Guidong photo next to his mother's picture. Lee Guin also told his mother that he didn't have the courage to ask Mayan to accompany him while he was sick.
옆에서 같이 좀 버텨달라고.
Since Lee Guin wasn't there, Mayan asked the grandmother for permission to wait for her ex-husband's return in his room. Upon entering Lee Guin's private room, she was reminded of their shared memories. The baby crib and its accessories were still well kept by Lee Guin. Mayan also opened her ex-husband's computer, which contained a video that, when played, showed Lee Guin's face. It turned out that the video was made by Lee Guin to remind himself whenever he experienced amnesia. Mayan couldn't bear to watch it any further because its content was very touching. When she left the room, she saw her grandmother in shock after watching the television broadcast. It turned out that there was news that Lee Guin would be holding a press conference. Seeing her grandmother so worried upon learning that Lee Guin would be holding a press conference, Mi Young tried to comfort her. She cared, even though there were already many reporters waiting in front of the house. Mi Young arrived just after Gun announced his illness and the reason why he stepped down from the position of president-director. Mi Young's presence became the center of attention, causing all the cameras to turn towards her. At that moment, Mi Young understood the reason Lee Guin ignored her, and she also asked the man not to lie to his conscience if he had never missed her all this time.
당신이 왜 계속 거짓말을 했는지.
Unfortunately, Gun loudly asked the manager to expel Mi Young. Even though Mi Young just didn't want Gun to suffer alone. She also promised she would never leave Lee Guin because of his illness and was confident they could face everything as long as they stayed together. Because she loved Lee Guin so much, the two of them ended up kissing without caring about the camera's attention. After holding a press conference, the two decided to stay at a hotel to discuss the future of their relationship. Even though she was reminded that Lee Kwin's illness was not trivial, the stubborn Mi-young insisted on staying by his side. In the hotel room, they chatted and enjoyed their time together on the bed just like 3 years ago. Both Mi-young and Lee Kwin felt more at ease expressing their love for each other. The next day, Mi-young intended to ask her grandmother for permission to accompany Lee Kwin because she didn't want the Lee Kwin she loved to face his illness alone.
미영아.
아플 때 아프더라도
Grandmother did not approve of the idea because Lee Kwin's grandfather had suffered from the same illness, so she had been in Mi-young's position before and knew the risks that awaited. Sensing Mi-young's sincerity, grandmother relented and agreed to give her approval if Mi-young's mother consented to their union. Meanwhile, the board meeting to discuss Lee Kwin's resignation was very chaotic because the elders were divided in their opinions. The majority of them rejected the decision, as Lee Kwin's performance in growing the company had been excellent. When Gun arrived, one of the elders who had wanted to bring him down from the start told Lee Kwin to prove his statement at the press conference to relinquish his position. Gun indeed planned to resign from the president position, but only for 3 months to enjoy a vacation.
제 거치는 제가 결정을 합니다.
During Lee Kwin's absence, the job was entrusted to a responsible and competent person, none other than Gun's grandmother. Upon Lee Kwin's inquiry, Mi-young resolved the issue by meeting with Daniel at his cafe first. She also thanked him for everything Daniel had done, which allowed Mi-young to reach this point. Unfortunately, up to this moment, Mi-young's heart could not anchor to Daniel. Daniel seemed to accept it and took it with an open heart, even though he appeared strong and did not show sadness. In reality, Daniel still got drunk to forget Mi-young's words after that meeting.
아, 강세라 씨 나 엄청 허접하게 보셨네.
As she was about to get on the gallif, Sarah found Daniel who was heavily drunk and unable to walk to his apartment on his own. Sarah helped Daniel and laid him on the bed, accidentally seeing 2 photos of children on the table near Daniel's bed, causing her expression to change, as if she remembered something. On the other hand, as a member of the Lee Kwin family who might face the same illness, Young also underwent a health checkup. Although the doctor stated that Young was healthy, he was still convinced he was experiencing symptoms of amnesia, so he informed his mother. His mother denied that her son had memory loss like Lee Kwin, because in reality, he was not the biological child of Lee Kwin's father.
용아, 그게 말이야.
Hearing the secret that had been long hidden by the mother, who ran out of the house because she couldn't accept this reality. At the same time, Lee Kwin and Mayan finally arrived. Lee Kwin clarified what had happened while Mayan tried to chase after the mother. The mother told the truth to Lee Kwin and apologized for hiding the fact that she and he were not siblings. The woman also handed over Gun's father's diary, which contained his expressions as someone living with a disease that occasionally caused amnesia. Just like himself with Mayan, Lee Kwin's father also hesitated to tell his wife because he didn't want the woman he loved to suffer. After comforting Yayan, Mayan approached Lee Kwin, who was crying, and embraced him with compassion. Lee Kwin thanked Mayan for being willing to accompany him during his lowest moments. The next day, Mayan visited her mother to seek her blessing to reconcile with Lee Kwin. She even wanted to live life according to her own wishes. At that time, Mayan's mother opposed it because she didn't want her daughter to suffer if Lee Kwin's illness relapsed, as when that time comes, Mayan would surely be left in solitude. However, Mayan and Lee Kwin will try harder because, after all, a mother's blessing is always what her children hope for.
이번에는 내 맘이 가는 대로 살고 싶다.
Meanwhile, Yayan, who appeared sad, then showed a resignation letter to Lee Kwin and promised to leave the house with their mother. But kindly, Lee Kwin will still accommodate them as family to accompany the grandmother and live harmoniously together. Meanwhile, Lee Kwin indeed plans to live elsewhere, and the manager is looking for a suitable house. However, the house chosen was too luxurious and expensive according to Mayan, so she suggested that Lee Kwin stay at Jayan's house instead. Not without conditions, Lee Kwin and Jayan have signed a house exchange contract that is very beneficial to Jayan, because he will live in Lee Kwin's house and be close to his girlfriend. Moreover, with the contract in place, the grandmother has given her approval.
정말로 얘를 우리 집에 받아들이려고요?
To make living at Giant's house more comfortable, Lee-Kwon and Mayan started organizing and cleaning from the front corner to the back. While tidying up the house, Mayan opened a storage box and found a casino chip from Lee-Kwon when he was in Macau. While having that chip, Mayan felt like she always had hope in life, and one by one, her dreams have come true. From now on, Lee-Kwon and Mayan promised to live together and await new hopes that will emerge in the future.
가만히 있어줘요. 평생.
Even though it was intended as a vacation, Mayan actually continued to go to work, as did Lee-Kwon, who had his own activities. Instead of going to the office, Lee-Kwon visited Mayan's mother's restaurant to strive to keep it going, so he could reconcile with his daughter.
솔직히 나 기다렸잖아.
However, even though she was openly bribed with violence, Mayan's mother was not tempted at all, unexpectedly. The woman gave an answer that left Lee-Kwon stunned, saying she was willing to take care of me unconditionally and would treat me like her own child as long as Lee-Kwon let go of Mayan.
나는 무조건 너 도와줄게.
Mayan's mother only felt sorry for her child who had been suffering all this time, so she did not give her blessing to Lee-Kwon. Instead, she asked him to understand a mother's feelings. However, Lee-Kwon's determination was strong. He didn't give up, and the next day, he went to see Mayan's mother, who was getting her hair done at the salon. Lee-Kwon still failed, as Mayan's mother had not changed her mind. That night,
내가 하면 안 된다.
when they were
하면
about
안
to spend
되는
time
게라고.
together, Mayan and Lee-Kwon were surprised by the arrival of Mayan's friends, Mr. Park, Nija, and Youngjun. The three of them apparently wanted to invite Lee-Kwon and Mayan to play cards. In several rounds, Lee-Kwon was consistently defeated by Mr. Park and his friends, which made him increasingly frustrated. Seeing this, Mayan decided to join the game because she was confident in her ability to win. The woman who was initially underestimated by Lee-Kwon turned into someone difficult to defeat. And unexpectedly, Mayan, who kept winning, wanted to continue playing, even to the point where the three of them were afraid to open their eyes. The next day, Legon and Mayan continued their mission to get the mother's blessing. They even followed her to exercise in the park. Legon tried various types of exercise equipment to prove his determination to his future mother-in-law. After exercising, Legon carefully carried Mayan, which secretly made Mayan's mother's heart happy. If only Legon didn't suffer from a strange illness, she would surely agree to give her blessing right away. Meanwhile, something was bothering Legon about his father, so he went home to reopen his late father's diary. Believing she held important information, Legon questioned Mayan's mother about her last meeting with his father. The woman reminisced about the past, when Legon's father left home, leaving behind Legon's mother and Legon, who was still a child. Legon's father stayed for some time at Mayan's mother's house before deciding to return to his family. However, in the end, he had an accident and died.
미안한 사람이었던 거지.
Legon gratefully thanked Mayan's mother for giving him his father's personal diary, which was the only cherished thing left behind and significantly changed Legon's perception of his father, who had always been believed to have disappointed his family. When he reopened the diary, Legon also found a photo tucked in the very last page, which was none other than a picture of a shady tree. Legon remembered something about the place in the photo that he had visited with his father when he was a child. To aid in the search, Legon sought help from a detective who turned out to be the former boss of the company that had once bought his factory. His company had gone bankrupt due to numerous illegal activities. If the detective succeeded in finding the exact location of the tree in the photo, Legon would pay him double. Hearing the very tempting offer, they agreed even though they had no clue at all about the place Legon was searching for. Ever since seeing the photo of the child in Daniel's apartment, Sarah tried to avoid the man every time they met. However, today, she mustered the courage to visit Daniel's apartment and offer him her homemade food.
처음 해봤거든요.
왜?
Since it was her first time cooking, the appearance of the dish Sarah brought was not very appealing, although after tasting it, it turned out to be quite delicious. Regarding the photo of the little girl that Sarah saw near Daniel's desk, it turned out to be Daniel's younger sister who disappeared when they were still children. Initially, Sarah was reluctant to say anything, but then she admitted that the little girl in the photo was her. Even though, in reality, she had no idea why the situation turned out this way.
근데 왜 내가 그 사진 속에 있는지.
After a few days passed, Daniel, who hadn't seen Mayang for a long time, invited her to a cafe to give her something. It wasn't a gift, but rather his performance singing on stage that made Mayang cry tears of joy as she reminisced about their beautiful times together. The happiness was not only felt by Mayang, but also by Lagan, who was touched after Mayang's mother saw his hard work. However, Leo couldn't offer his blessings with a smile, so he wouldn't be attending their wedding.
항상 웃게. 광대가 절대로 내려오는 일 없이.
Sometime later, before exchanging their sacred wedding vows, Lagan invited Mayang, who was already dressed up and wearing a beautiful gown, to go to a certain place. The manager and others were in a panic because guests had already started arriving, and even the grandmother almost fainted. The reason behind all this was that the detective had found the location of the pond in question, which was about to be relocated. The detective tried to buy time so that the officials who were going to move the pond would wait for Lagan and Mayang's arrival. Upon arriving there, Lagan reminisced about his last moments together with his father. Besides playing and chatting, they also buried a box that could only be opened once Lagan was grown up. Lagan dug it up with determination until he found the wooden box containing the mementos of his time with his father. Items like a tennis ball, cufflinks, and a letter which contained advice that would instantly change Lagan's life. After reading the letter from his father stored in the wooden box and buried near the tree where they last met, Lagan felt relieved and was able to live his life without burdens. Both of them arrived at the wedding venue, just as the manager was about to ask the guests, who had been waiting for a long time, to leave. Not wanting to miss her daughter's wedding, Mayang's mother, who initially refused to attend, suddenly appeared in a hanbok and looked very beautiful. Unlike the first time, this wedding vow was spoken sincerely, and in the end, the affection moved the guests to tears. After officially getting married, they chose Jeju Island as their honeymoon destination. Lee Kulin and Mayan enjoyed the trip, and Mayan was even able to drive herself on the quiet roads, allowing Laikon to kiss his wife contentedly. Meanwhile, the grandmother's desire to hold a grandchild soon was at odds with Laikon's plan to postpone having children for 6 months. It seems he wanted to enjoy the early days of marriage with Mayan. At one point, the grandmother planned a project similar to the incident in Macau 3 years ago. With the help of manager Tak, she asked the bartender to put a stimulant in Lee Kuan and Mayan's drinks. It seems that the dose of the drug from Mr. Pak was very strong, because even after just 1 glass of drink, Mayan and Laikon staggered directly to the hotel room. The next morning, without remembering any details, both of them woke up unclothed, just like the experience in Macau. Realizing they were being set up, Laikon and Mayan searched for the mastermind behind this ridiculous plan, none other than manager Tak and Lion. On the second day on Jeju Island, Laikon and Mayan were still caught up in romance. They never left each other's side, which made Laikon certain that Mayan was destined for him, ever since the incident with the ring rolling in the shopping center. Romantic conversations under the twinkling stars became one of the most precious moments in their lives. Sometime later, after the passionate honeymoon, Mayan found out she was pregnant and would be blessed with twins, which aligned with Yong's mother's prayer for them to have twins, so that their blessings would be multiplied. Meanwhile, Daniel made sure that the photo of the girl he always kept was handed over to the girl's mother, who never denied it in the slightest. Upon discovering the fact that she had been adopted all this time, and the woman who raised her was not her biological mother, it was difficult for her to accept. On one hand, she felt fortunate to still have the opportunity to meet the only family member with a blood relation, who was none other than Daniel. Meanwhile, Laikon underwent a medical examination, and the results showed no signs of any illness, so the doctor advised him to live a more relaxed life. A few years later, Laikon and Mayang's children, a set of male and female twins, had grown up and were living a life full of happiness. While spending time together in the park, Laikon read an interesting story that they listened to with enthusiasm. Laikon and Mayang were very happy in their marriage and complimented each other well. There was not a single regret about the things they had gone through, because even though they were seasoned with challenges and problems, they always ended in joy.